So with the release of Build 42, Project Zomboid has released a lot of new lore for us to dig through, with the main thing obviously being newspapers as you read by the title. I'll be going through them by order from when they were released to the most latest one, uncovering suspicious government activities before the outbreak even started, and fill in the lore at the beginning of the Nox infection. With that said, I'll be reading all the newspapers, so you don't have to. With the first one being a baseball player with title Rangers Triumph in West Point, which I assume to be a Rangers player in the baseball team that beat West Point. And on the right has a local teacher wins a national award. What award? We don't know. We have the title Brandenburg Disaster Funds on the way. Says governor. The governor has reassured the majority of Brandenburg that the long-promised federal funds for the rebuilding of towns are on the way, despite the overwhelming early response for the tornado on April 18th, which saw countless meals provided for the residents in the aftermath. The promised federal funds for the rebuilding have still not arrived. Buildings are patched up with wood, and major damage are still evident. Governor Cal Fairweather speaking in Frankfurt yesterday. Early warnings meant many residents were taking shelter when the tornado touched down in the northern part of town. However, high winds killed 3 residents and injured dozens. The F2 tornado destroyed cars and razed houses. Hundreds of people remain homeless and living in the hotels or trailer parks paid for by the state, with other living in relatives or friends' house. Up to 40% of residents and 30% of businesses in the area were uninsured, meaning the cost of taxpayers could exceed to $50 million. So with these early newspapers, I'm going to be repeating myself a lot, saying, with the context we have, we obviously can be suspicious. And that is the only real case I have, because it is weird the government falling behind on the relief fund, even though they were really fast on it on April 18th, according to this newspaper. But nothing is concrete, it's just the government being secretive as they always are, so we don't really know if they actually knew or not. Anyways, on another piece coming from Riverside, we have the title, Hunter Injured in Deer Attack. Jonathan Nathan, a hunter from New York, has said he was lucky to not have been severely injured with a run of a stag in the forest of Riverside. I've been hunting this Knox area for years, said Nathan, but I never saw something like this, especially outside the rutting season. I was lining up my shot on a rabbit when a white-tailed stag suddenly burst out of the woods. With the next story, that's my favorite in this article, we have Ekron oldest resident gives lifelong secret. Nancy Hume, who lived to the vulnerable age of 103, is your typical longevity tips article. She says, bourbon before your supper, bed before 10, and never get involved with men. Never. Thus concludes our first newspaper. If I have to give this newspaper a ranking, it'll probably be like F tier. There's like some odd situations, but nothing too out of the ordinary. It has no recurring themes besides the government being sus, and the only thing it has going for it is that it's the first newspaper. The second newspaper, also from Knox News, dated July 2nd, 1993, shows the first sign of something going wrong. The headline article, widespread telephone outages in Knox area, with the cause of the outage quote-unquote unknown to those in charge of the network. An expert named Kevin Hogan told the reporters from Knox News that this sort of failure is incredibly uncommon. It doesn't seem to be related to any switchboard or central system. Either they are all overclocked by a lightning strike, or this is work of vandals or saboteurs. Moving back up top to those 2 images, we have Delilah and Brandenburg indefinitely. Just a continuation from the previous headline, nothing big, nothing important is the last time we see of it. It's just going to be in Brandenburg indefinitely, as it says. Next one is Chapel Downs plans Virginia track. Your guess is as good as mine. There's no context to it. You can't read page 4, so that's where it ends. Going back down to the middle article, we have the title, Locals Compete for Mint Julep Prize. Many Kentucky friendships have been irreparably destroyed by arguments about the perfect mint julep. And yet, the mint julep competition is held last Saturday in Brandenburg. Casey Stockholm, judges deemed her, and the story ends. Maybe in Bill 43, we'll have the back of newspapers. In the third article, we have the title, Irvington resident, lucky to be alive, tells a tale of a dangerous accident, one which EMT services were late due to the phone lines being down. And the woman, Sally Graham, was pulled to safety from the burning vehicle well before an ambulance arrived. And with the story ending there, I think I'm also give this an F tier, but just right above the first one, since it does have a recurring theme that will show up in future newspapers. Our friends at Knox News provides for a third paper, dated July 3rd, 1993. The headline for this article for this paper tells us a scathing FBI investigation into lawmakers of the Kentucky General Assembly called Operation Centaur. Politicians, no matter their party allegiance, were found guilty of toxic waste dumping, racketeering, and conspiracy to defraud the state of Kentucky. And as you know, the Ohio River in Project Zomboid is tainted, leading you to die if you drink too much of it. I'm pretty confident in saying that the Kentucky General Assembly is responsible for causing this. The House Speaker of the Kentucky House of Representatives was also charged of extortion, racketeering, and lying to the FBI. The governor was unscathed, having to distance himself from his 2 aides who were also wrapped up in the scandal. The second article further reiterates that the phone lines are still down, making at least 24 hours of no service. And commenting on that, further loss of communication has left many businesses and homes in turmoil. In the third article, we have a West Point resident dies after eating 60 hot dogs. In West Point, the 16th annual hot dog eating competition had a tragic end, as the winner, Bolton Jupiter, passed away shortly after winning. He held up his trophy, said an onlooker, and a little wiener of shades. Then he kneeled over in a bucket of mayonnaise. In my opinion, that's probably the best way to go out. Winning a hot dog eating competition and then falling on a bucket of mayonnaise, it takes a real man to do that. I'm gonna be ranking this newspaper as C. It did somewhat tell us of why the river is tainted in game. It had a recurring theme with the phone line still being down, and it topped it off with a really funny story. Before we get on to our next article, if you like playing Project Zomboid events or you've seen them around YouTube and thought to yourself, hey, I want to play some of those, well, join my Discord server as I'm hosting an event depending on whenever you're watching this video, I guess. This upcoming event, I'll be hosting a Project Zomboid parkour stylization. If you want to be part of that, join the Discord server down below. Hope to see you guys there. Anyways, let's get right back to the newspapers, because I know you don't read. I'm looking at you, Joe. Okay, Knox News returns with its 4th article on Independence Day, July 4th. Here, we read about no danger to public. The military truck carrying hazardous waste that crashed north of March Bridge. The military says the materials were for quote-unquote research, and they wouldn't pose a threat to the public if it came to contact with it. Hardly convincing. This ties back into yesterday's headline, with these toxic chemicals being moved was only possible due to the repeals by the legislatures. Also, reports of respiratory infection from poorly stored ammunition is circulating around the Knox area. If you know anything about the Knox infection, then you know it's an airborne zombie plague. And that pretty much sums up the first article. If you want to read it word for word, just pause the video. I'm sure you guys are smart enough to connect the dots of why they're moving out of Kentucky based on the previous newspaper, as I briefly mentioned in this one. But moving back to the top, we have hot weather to continue next week, which gives us weather update for Kentucky. And Tim Johnson, likely out for the season. If you don't know Tim Johnson, you don't know Project Zomboid ball. In the middle article, Speedway could host Formula X. Formula X organizers have given the preliminary nod to Irvington Speedway as a host track for the 1996 US Grand Prix. Though the host is still under negotiations, officials are privately favoring the Speedway due to the location near Louisville and the track's innovative design and openness to authorities. Moving on to the right, we have a happy Independence Day from Knox News. They said, "It's been an honor to serve you at Knox News for 2 consecutive July 4ths. We hope our readers have a wonderful day and remember why America was founded, and dream of what it could one day be. All the very best, Ian J. McCarrock, Editor-in-Chief." And that's the end of July 4th newspaper. There's 2 filler articles, nothing important really going on in the main. Just shows the aftermath of what happened in the previous one, but I did hint at the airborne disease, so maybe that could be something. Other than that, I think a solid F tier is fitting for this newspaper. Knox News again returns for a 5p on July 5th, 1993. The main picture gives us a recap of July 4th festivities, which went on despite the outages of phone lines and increasing reports of strange illnesses, namely in Muldrow. Residents of Kentucky enjoyed from what was seen as a normal 4th of July. Really, the main interest here for us is the 2 other articles showing us that the day in the life of Knox County is becoming more and more abnormal by the day. The next one, foul smell could be quote-unquote natural process. Joan Delahunt tells us how pollution from the Ohio River may be the cause of the foul odor emanating the area, and how algae is invading areas it wasn't in before, and seaweed is washing up in shorelines. The third article tells us that dogs are going feral and how they're attacking farm animals, and a threat from the sheriff against dogs that bite people, saying that dogs should never roam free, and if they're at home, they should be fenced in or kept indoors so they can't escape. Like always, the article cuts short on us, so it is very possible they further elaborated on what happens after the dog bites you, but we don't know. Oh yeah, I have to give this a rank. You know, fuck this tier list. Throw it away. Get out of the window. Get fuck out of here. On July 6, 1993, finally gives us a different outlet, the Kentucky Herald. The headline reads, illness outbreak in Muldrow. On the right side, dozens of cases reported in the area. Below it reading, response hampered by telephone outages. Dozens of cases of the flu-like illness have been reported in the area of Muldrow, a small town just north of Fort Knox. The symptoms including severe nausea and fever. Multiple military installations, the toxic waste dumps in the area. Doctors are looking at whether it's a chemical leak into the water supply or food chain may be responsible, though calls to outside authorities for assistance are reportedly being met with obfuscation and denials. The US Army has opened quarantine facilities in Fort Knox Hospital to combat the strange illness. And on the main picture shows a house in Muldrow to what I'm assuming is a zomboid in front of the house with the ambulance right behind it. The other article isn't as relevant, though it's still interesting. A art exhibition in Louisville drew a large crowd on Monday night, July 5th, for Aisling Dwyer, an up-and-coming Irish artist. Like I said earlier, it's really not relevant, but it did draw a large crowd in the midst of this mysterious virus going on. And at the bottom, almost cut off, the president also canceled to attend this G7 summit in Tokyo. G7 is a meeting of major world leaders to discuss the economic state of the world, so the leader of the United States choosing not to attend is a telling sign that there's some domestic issues going on in the nation that the government isn't being completely transparent to the people about. The 7th article from the National Dispatch, a New York Times style outlet, discusses some international news, namely the situation in Iraq. This one is also dated July 6. And there's a lot of words that I don't feel like reading, so I'm gonna summarize it for you guys here. Pause if you want to read the whole thing. The president of Iraq said he'll stop dealing with the UN and that he has, quote unquote, weapons of such awesome power, and that they, the Americans, would cry like dogs, they were to learn from them. Though unknown to the Iraqi government at the time, the United States had more pressing issues than them. So the article gave us a lot of international news, like the Doreen gem heist in Paris, but we got no tidbits about the Knox infection in this paper, other than expanding upon what we already know from the previous paper. On the next paper, the National Dispatch returns once again for the July 7th paper. This edition is more relevant, discussing events in Kentucky. First, we'll go over the op-ed article, written by opinion piece by Keith Haraldson, references the military toxic waste leak mentioned back on July 4th, and Keith offers us a scathing take. People of Knox County have no communications from the military, and there are reports of armed, dangerous groups having standoffs with the federal authorities. Moving on to the headline article, we see in bold initialized text, blockade in Kentucky. The military blocked all roads and highways leading to Kentucky area without declaring or communicating any reasons of why they did so. Early Tuesday morning, hundreds of troops arrived encircling civilians, as well as displacing a few who were outside the boundaries. Telecommunications were still down at this time as well. A civilian named Larry Stoddard gave his take on the events. The man, working as a nurse, saw soldiers putting up fence along the road. It looked like a movie, he said. A huge truck pulled alongside me and told me I couldn't go any further. Larry, who lives in West Point, was stranded and unable to go home. The military lockdown seemed to be just the beginning. And after this, we don't get another newspaper until July 13th. However, we get two of them, one by the National Dispatch and another by the Louisville Sun-Times. First headline coming from the National Dispatch reads, WHO ground all flights. Millions of travelers were thrown into limbo when World Health Organization on Sunday advised all flights, excluding military medical ones, be suspended worldwide to stop the quote-unquote Knox virus spreading. Though the WHO lacks any legal authority to enforce the advice. All flights were grounded almost immediately by the airlines, shocked at the sudden nature of the announcement. In a White House briefing, the president called the WHO announcement unwelcome and economically unsound. Air Aaron CEO Ryan Bryan said, "We knew this was coming, but we thought we had more time to prepare. We had to comply. None of us want to be responsible for the outbreak. But we have a business to run. The cure cannot be worse than the disease." Meanwhile, the European community has advised all its member countries to close their internal and external borders as a precaution. It's understood that all EC member states will comply with the advice, though the United Kingdom has asked for a short delay before implementation. And on the main picture, it shows countless countries with their flights being canceled. And then next, the Louisville Sun-Times, which shows us a picture of a zomboid, with the text on the right reading, Knox virus creates walking corpses, and Knox inclusion zone widen. And lastly, nationwide curfew as riots continue. A little intermission before we go on to our next newspaper. I know I'm reading pretty fast and just kind of summarizing the past few articles, but I can assure you I've been reading everything that you should know and not just random fluff from an opinion piece or whatever. So yeah, trust me, you're not missing out on much. Anyways, Louisville Sun-Times comes again with the July 14th paper. Article shows us that the president has evacuated Washington, D.C., leaving the people to fend for themselves. We're also informed that the Knox exclusion zone release held civilians and that the communications are still being disrupted. Next, National Dispatch informs us the UN denouncing the response to the Knox infection. 38 different nations stating the complete lack of clarity over the details of the outbreak. This came after the leak of the undead person inside the Knox exclusion zone. Different nations and institutions have begun lockdown protocols as the globe seemed to be inching closer to complete anarchy. The second article on this paper tells us of the Who Decries Threats by Doris Hunt. Condemning hundreds of death threats, the organization pleads for people to stay on task and to not contribute, an extremely unhelpful response to the current crisis. On the next paper, we have the Kentucky Herald once again on the same day of July 14th. On the right, reading virus lethal, but contained. And under that, President leaves Capitol, quote unquote, unrelated to outbreak. On Tuesday, General McGrew released a statement admitting that the Knox virus is degenerative. However, he also stated that its spread is contained within the event boundary, which now encompasses hundreds of square miles of the state of Kentucky. The CDC has released statements saying that while the virus seems to be the cause of the great violence between sufferers, its methods of transmission through the fluid contact is an ineffective way of spreading. Officials have also denied that the president has left Washington, D.C. due to the virus, saying that his absence concerns a private family matter. And then on the right, we have two major religion sites closing their doors to the outside world due to the threat of the Knox virus. Vatican City, the seat of the Roman Catholic Pope, and Mecca, the holiest city in Islam, are now both closed to the public. And that is it for the July 14th papers. The first paper shows obviously a dead person, or a zomboid, and the last one denies that it's real. And then after July 14th, we have the fall of the civilization with another leak from the Louisville Sun-Times as the infected breach to the Knox zone. This shows the blatant opposite claims of General McGrew. The photo shows hundreds of infected people breaching through the barricades and the fleeing civilians from the state of Kentucky. However, despite this damning evidence, the mayor of Kentucky still claims that the state is still safe. This is too realistic to our real-life government. That's all I gotta say. The National Dispatch further on the headline of the Sun-Times during the breach, which occurred at 5 a.m. July 14th. Over 100 military personnel and civilians were killed, with hundreds more wounded. According to eyewitnesses, the sounds of gunfire attracted even more infected, with the survivors, military and civilians, retreating to Louisville. The infected horde moved through the suburbs, and the roads going through Ohio and Indiana became gridlocked from panicked civilians attempting to escape the horde. And on the right, it says virus may spread through the air. These reports come from survivors who are outside the exclusion zone following the ill the Knox infection, despite having no contact to the virus beforehand. The HWO, aka WHO, declares the virus is a greater threat than the Black Plague or Spanish flu, coming to the conclusion that the virus is already certainly global and the world is over as the people will know it. And then finally, on July 16th, 1993, we have the final Kentucky Herald. The title being Knox virus spreads through air. On the left, he gives a special thanks to all his readers who are still able to read, and that this is likely his final edition. The virus is in Louisville. Several of us are running fevers, and there are hundreds of infected in the streets. We wish to thank all our readers for being with us through these unprecedented times. If you are one of the few immune, you are steward for the new world. It's now your duty to carry on the light of the humanity of civilization. Even a single candle will cut through the deepest darkness. May God have mercy on all the rest of us and our loved ones. In the middle, there's a photograph taken by one of the team members in the Kentucky Herald, showing them driving on Thursday near downtown Louisville, with hundreds of zomboids showing up in the background. The final words gives advice to the survivors. Help the elderly, the vulnerable, gunfire attracts infected, keep a baseball bat or another easy-to-use weapon, and once a person dies, they come back, and they only wish to spread the virus. And honestly, after reading this article, I think this deserves S tier. That's right, we're bringing it back. This actually deserves S+ tier. That's it. No more tier ranking. That's the end. That's it. Yeah, that's it. Bye. Oh wait, sorry. There's one more we have to get through. The Louisville Sun-Times shows us another photo of the infected storming the St. Puritan Hospital, overrunning the survivors, proclaiming the military was defeated by the Knox virus, and the spreading without bites from the infected. The headline begs for any readers to pray for them and to keep the guns loaded in your home before it's too late. And that's obviously it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed. Comment down below if you have any conspiracies of things you learned in this video. Also, if you guys like the editing in this video, make sure to check my boy's Minnesotan's account. Really underrated Project Zomboid YouTuber who, well, I should say the YouTube algorithm hasn't been so kind towards. But yeah, I'll see you guys later. Also, please subscribe and check out my other videos. I'm begging. 'Cause I'm about to crash out.